What's up, friends? Welcome to SPDM TV. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I watch a lot of TV. We talk about various TV topics, reviews, and general appreciation of TV past and new. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and serialized at MLHilty2452 to see what all I'm watching. This week, we are talking about Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Season 2 is sort of around the corner. So I figured, and it's been about a year since season 1 at least started. So I figured it would be a good time to bring somebody on to talk about it. We used to work together for a little company called Lead America, where we would go around and put on leadership development, or in your case, theater, right? You were part
Yeah,
of the theater conference, which I always found that fascinating and always a good group to be around, as opposed to my leadership university group, which I feel we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways. But pleased to bring on Matthew Nicholson. How's it going?
it's going well. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you sticking with this, and I'm looking forward to talking about Percy Jackson, but also looking to talk to you because you are an aspiring screenwriter, and I'd love to hear more about that. So, looking forward to chatting more about that. Let's start with Percy Jackson.
That's
So Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This was a Disney Plus original series. The premise of it is demigod Percy Jackson leads a quest across America to prevent a war among the Olympian gods. This is based on the very popular franchise or book franchise and stars a whole slew of people. We've got Walker Scobell, Leah Jeffries, Aaron, I hope I'm saying that right, Aaron Simhadri, and then we got some people like Jason Matsuzaki, Toby Stevens, lots of interesting people here. So before we get into the show, I'm curious, have you read the books or what's your experience been like with the books or the
oh,
movie? Or okay, so give me some of your thoughts about what interested you about the books and what do you like about the franchise?
absolutely. I think some kids really glom to Harry Potter, and a whole other subsect of people glom on to Percy Jackson, and kind of been waiting for a faithful adaptation with a green light with the actual creator Rick Riordan. I think we all kind of disassociate the movies that happened. As much as I love Logan Lerman, and I would love to see him involved in this project somehow, I think we can all kind of put those aside and look at this fresh TV show with fresh eyes.
Mhm.
I think this is something that book fans have been waiting a long time for, a faithful adaptation that has the right budget and team behind it. And yeah, I mean, I've been obsessed with mythology since I was a kid. I think what the Greek myths do is make them so human that gods aren't perfect, that they're messy and they betray each other, and they're just as messy as my family is on Thanksgiving. So, that you bringing that into the books and making it accessible for kids. I think Percy Jackson, as a screw up who makes good eventually, is
Mhm.
kind of a character that I certainly identified with as a kid. Percy also has dyslexia, and I grew up with a few learning disabilities, so I
Mhm.
really latched onto that as a kid. And a lot of what makes Percy different, like his dyslexia and his ADHD, which I also have, actually were superpowers. His dyslexia meant that he could read ancient Greek because he was hardwired differently. So I
Mhm.
thought somebody who was different and was able to turn those differences into kind of a superpower to save the world really appealed to me as a kid.
Interesting. So I had never read the books, and I unfortunately have seen the movies, though. That was the next question that I was going to ask you. And as somebody who hasn't read the books, I thought the movies were fine. Not
Yes,
good, not great, but not bad. They were fine. And I think some of the things that kind of irked me a little bit about the movie is you're right, it's the Logan Lerman of it.
yes, it has.
Logan Ler Logan Lerman is a good actor.
Mhm.
He's very talented. Maybe just a tad bit miscast, and maybe also potentially not ready for prime time for something like that.
I think that's quite possible. I think he did do a fine job. I think everyone did do a fine job
Yeah.
on that project. I do think that there were probably some creative
Mhm.
differences, but I think what the show does well, this is a story that people can follow episode to episode. I think they
Mhm.
really did try and cram too much into 2 hours.
Mhm.
This quest across America to track down the lightning bolt. is one worthy of spending 8 hours with. And I
Mhm.
think the show was able to slow it down and really show us relationships that we don't even really get in the book all that much. My favorite scenes from the entire season were between Percy and his mother.
Mhm.
I think that the show really grounded us in this
Yeah.
relationship of mother and son. And even though that they're apart, we see them in flashbacks and how difficult it was to raise a demigod and to make sure that he doesn't know what he is really, and to be separate from her once lover Poseidon of all people, and to hold the faith that he's still looking after them and looking over them. Those quiet moments of mother and son, I really think, ground the really fantastical fight sequences
Mhm.
where we're fighting manticores and Echidna, the mother of all monsters,
Right.
or a teenager fighting the literal god of war. That he's fighting to save his mother gives it such a human bent that
Mhm.
you can't help but root for him.
Exactly. And one of the things that you're seeing kind of this happen a lot in TV now is that a lot more books are going to the miniseries route or TV route because, like you said, with the movie, it's jamming so much in to a movie that you're inevitably going to risk it being too long,
Yep.
risk it being a part one, part two type of thing, or part three, looking at you, The Hobbit, three
Yep.
movies for a very tiny
Did we
book.
need it?
We didn't need a third movie for that, but hey, capitalism is a thing, especially in Hollywood, so I
Oh,
understand why that's a thing. But you're seeing this trend lately where if there is a book series, particularly a beloved book series, that needs a little bit more attention, it needs to expand the scope a little bit, it's going to TV. And I think that is the perfect medium for certain things. We're gonna see we've already got a proof of concept with Percy Jackson. A little nervous about how it's gonna work with Harry Potter,
ooh, yeah.
even though I'm excited for the prospect of it, but I don't know. I don't know
I
how it's
think
gonna
we've
pan out.
tread that ground already, between the books and the movies and the Pottermore and the merch and Universal. I'm here in California now, and I've gone to Hogsmeade and I've bought the T-shirts, and I mean they have merchified everything. I
Mhm,
respect it, but I got to say, I don't know that we need it. I want to see more original shows on television. I say that as a screenwriter.
mhm.
I'm out here, I'm reading scripts that are phenomenal, new worlds with new voices. That's the stuff I want to see. That being said, I do love shows like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, where we get some mythology or some magic on top of the real world. That's a little different than a Game of Thrones with like a throwback kingdom with dragons. I
Mhm.
love a modern day story that's got a bent of magic or mythology to it. And I think that really appeals to people, a little bit of escapism in the world of today.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm certainly not asking for it. Especially with as problematic as J.K. Rowling is, I don't want to see them
Abs
make any more money.
Absolutely. I do agree wholeheartedly with the J.K. Rowling piece, and her involvement in anything regarding her relationship with Warner Brothers Discover is already uncomfortable, to say the least, because I believe they originally said that, oh, she's not going to be involved, and now she's like executive producing and consulting, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. So, but in regards to Percy Jackson, our typical scale here, or I guess, so in regards to season one of Percy Jackson, did you like it, love it, hate it, dislike it, or was it just okay?
Oh, I loved it. I
Mhm.
was there watching the moment it dropped. I really couldn't have been more invested in the story if I tried. I'm
Yeah.
currently wearing a Camp Half Blood t-shirt that I got at
Oh,
one of the
that's
premieres. So
fantastic.
I'm deeply invested.
That's fantastic. I am also in the firmly loved it camp. And for me, what I appreciated so much about this is two things. One, the extra time that's allotted
Mm.
here gave me a better understanding of motivations. It gave me a better understanding of backstory, gave relationships that you're supposed to buy in a 2-hour movie. If you're gonna build relationships with people who just meet, you have to do a lot of things in order to make those relationships believable and also make sure that the performances, everything needs to work out almost perfectly in a 2 hour movie. However, with a series like this, you have time to give some of that backstory that you traditionally wouldn't get in a movie, or something that would end up on the cutting room floor. And
Absolutely.
also, I think what I enjoy so much about Percy Jackson is that I think they found the perfect Percy Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Walker Scobell is perfectly cast. I think he has that right sense of, he's like a little mini Ryan Reynolds.
Mhm,
Percy is an irreverent character. I believe that's the word he uses to describe himself in the book. He's
mhm,
irreverent, and so is Walker. And that really bleeds through. But they really did find a star. I mean, he is
mhm,
basically in every single scene of that show. And it seemed like he enjoyed every single moment, threw
mhm.
himself fully into it. And that's what I think we all wanted, that he really lived up to the expectation and the hype.
Well, plus the other thing too is, with all due respect to Disney Plus, not exactly the strongest track record when it comes to non-Marvel,
Oh yeah.
non-Star Wars TV series or movies, quite frankly, for that matter. Now,
I mean, didn't they
I,
delete the Willow series like altogether from their platform? Wasn't that them?
that was them. I'm not
Yeah.
happy about that because although season one of Willow had issues, it's also a season one. And
Yes.
that is a
Give people time. Like
that is
give the writers and the cast time to gel, guys.
that is a trend in Hollywood right now that I cannot stand. Whereas you see some of the shows that we grew up with go 6, 7 seasons, and also they had full 24 episode
Episode.
seasons
Absolutely.
consistently every year as well. And yet we can't get some shows to last more than one season with only 10
Agreed.
episodes. How?
Bring back 24 episode seasons. I love a filler episode, a bottle episode where it's encapsulated. That's where we get like the fun genre where we go black and white, or we do a noir episode or a Sleeping Beauty episode. And you get great character pairings that you don't with a 10 episode thing where the side characters get to have their moment to shine. That I would love more 24 episode seasons, more work for everyone.
I think it's only a matter of time before we start going back to stuff like that, mainly because if you look at the current landscape of television right now, television used to be just cable, 24 episode seasons. You get the occasional ones on all the premium channels and all the semi-premium channels like the FXs that wouldn't have full seasons, but they still would last a long time. And now, with this sprint to get as much content as possible,
Mm.
all of these streamers, they're trying to throw as much stuff out there to people as possible and not give people enough of a chance to discover it because certain streamers, they or even channels now, they're not very good at advertising this stuff, and
No.
also they're not giving people enough time for an audience to find it. And more importantly, some streamers, they release it all at once, and some streamers, they do week to week. I don't understand why we are still in an age where we just throw everything on. Like, I hate to call out Netflix and Amazon, but they throw stuff on and then they just cross their fingers and hope that people are going to watch it and to find it. And yet then there's some things that they will release week to week. They're quote unquote more popular things, but we're reverting back to, hey, all these TV shows, they're starting to get commercials now and they're starting to go week to week again, just like it used to. So the next natural progression for this is more episodes per season, which I think more people are clamoring for things like that because 10 episodes or 8 episodes, 10 episodes, sometimes that's not enough time.
I agree. And you know what? I love a tight story. I think like Doctor Who is able to do 20 episode seasons, but something like Torchwood, they would do 10 really solid episodes. I think that is a great model that America tried to borrow. And I think some shows really lend itself to telling 10 really tight episodes, like something like Netflix's The Sandman. It's the perfect length for that season.
Mhm.
But I think there are different shows. And look at Netflix's top 10, things like Suits and Gilmore Girls. Those all had 20 episodes a
Mhm.
season. that's the stuff that people come back to binge again and again, because there's enough episodes in there that you forget exactly what happens in every season, that you can kind of fall back into it with your friends and rediscover the magic. Whereas where I think 10 episodes, you really do remember the entirety of the season.
And there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for you to just throw it on in the background, and because before it's going to be over, particularly those shows that are only half an hour, which
Oh, yeah.
those are starting to feel a little bit like a relic now, where most of these shows now, the episodes are 45 minutes to like an hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot to be desired when it comes to some of the stuff on television right now. So, regarding Percy Jackson, walk me through some of the things that you mentioned the relationship between Percy and his mom, and then how grounded this was. Was there anything else in particular about the series that really captured your attention? And by the way, spoiler talk for
Yes.
all those people out there who are like, "Oh, I don't want to be spoiled for a series that has been out for a year and a TV or a movie that's been out for a while and a book series that's been out for even longer." So,
Mhm.
respectfully, for all those who are worried about spoilers, you've been warned. I will have to probably edit this somewhere else, but that's okay. But what else about this did you really enjoy?
Sure. I think one thing that I was really looking forward to was the character of Annabeth, played by Sarah Jeffries. I think she did such a phenomenal job with that character from the very first frame that we see her. She's the daughter of Athena, wise, thinking 10 moves ahead of everybody. Getting to spend this many hours with her and to see her relationship with Percy built, where they don't trust each other at first and they're working against each other. And slowly across this journey across the country, they begin to really develop a relationship. And I don't want to spoil anything from the books, but their relationship changes and grows as teenagers do. So I think
Mm,
getting to see that friendship develop and what they bring out in each other and the sacrifices they make for each other, I just thought was so perfectly played. And I was really looking forward to that. And then you got to throw it up for just the CGI of things.
mhm.
Seeing some of the water creatures like a naiad, which is like a river spirit, is something I grew up reading all of these myths, and these are the kind of the way I pictured it. It was even better than I pictured some of them. To really get to enjoy that, getting to see the fight in the middle of the St. Louis Arch. I got to do my own little Percy adventure this year. I Right
Nice.
before I moved out to Los Angeles, I went to go to an event that was held in New York for Percy Jackson at the top of where Mount Olympus is on the 600th floor. It was a
Nice.
fully gray day full of clouds where we couldn't actually see anything. And then a couple days later, I drove across the country and went through St. Louis and ended up in Los Angeles and Venice Beach, where they end up in the books
Mhm.
and in the show. So I got to
Nice.
have a whole little journey like they did. So it
Mhm.
was kind of fun to, I was rereading the book at the time. So kind of getting to visit some of these landmarks, just like in the shows. So much fun. I also think my favorite scene is the final battle between Percy and Ares. I think that is such a great moment where Percy embraces his power and uses the power of the ocean to defeat the god of war with a much smaller sword is such a moment. I think those character defining moments that we wait all season for a character to fully embrace who they are, accept their power, and kind of get a taste of what they'll be in the future.
Mhm.
That is such a, to use a pun, a watershed moment for a character like Percy Jackson.
Mhm.
That I will think of that wave rising up behind him to overtake Ares for a long time coming. And that was in the poster art. We saw that key art of him on the beach with Riptide, his sword in the sand. They even had a little demo of that at D23, so I got to
Oh,
kneel in the
nice.
sand and hold
That's awesome.
Riptide in my hand. It was really good. Lit up when you held it. It's very cool. So yeah, I think those were some of my favorite moments. Even just seeing Olympus,
Mhm.
seeing Zeus and Poseidon fight for the love of a son. Is really, I really do think the magic of the show is finding the humanity in the gods.
Mhm.
And I think it's easy to write off these big characters, but they have small problems and they have small feelings sometimes too. They can be quite bitter. And I
Mhm.
love
And that's something that makes this show so enjoyable for me because we're we're used to seeing in some aspects Greek gods just being perfect and just scheming with one another. To ground them a little bit and to humanize them, I think is a really smart move. And I have to give credit for the casting of this
Yes.
because we talked about Walker Scobell. We talked a little bit about the actress who played Annabeth. I will give credit to a lot of the people that they cast as the gods. You mentioned Ares, and I'm not a pro wrestling fan,
But yes.
but when he pulls up on the motorcycle when they're
Incredible.
on the side of the road, I was like, that's Edge. Like even I know that, and
Yes.
I'm not even a wrestling fan. Obviously, I'm not a wrestler, but Adam Copeland, as he's known now because he's not the Edge, he's not a part of WWE anymore, which is fine. I think that was a great call for casting him because if you're looking for a God of War, two characteristics that you're looking for someone that's not going to take any shit from anyone. And Edge really didn't
Found
do
it.
that. But also you're looking for a twinge of confidence mixed in with some arrogance. And
Yes.
wrestling is the perfect space for something like that. So I think the casting for that was inspired. And we'll take a moment really quick because Zeus got
Lance Reddick.
Lance Reddick, which it really bums me out that because I did a rewatch of this and that scene with Percy and Zeus, or just all the scenes, were
Mhm.
magnetic. And Lance Reddick is just one of a kind, and it sucks that he's gone now, gone unfortunately far too soon for someone like him. But if they're gonna recast Zeus, or if
Actually, there was a lot of talk about what might happen. Do you respect him and do you change the story? Do you involve Hera more and let Hera take over that role? But no, they just announced they have actually recast the role. So somebody will be stepping in. And I'm sure that Lance Reddick's family probably had a say in that. Just knowing the level of care that this production takes with things, it wouldn't surprise me. And I think there was even talk of involving them in that decision after that they had time to mourn. And this was actually, I believe it was his last project to air after his passing, if not one of the last few. And
Mhm.
just what a pillar of strength. I mean, look no further for a thunderous, electric actor to play Zeus. And the next actor certainly will have huge shoes to fill. And I'm sure that it will be done well.
Have they announced who said?
They did. It was literally just the other day I noticed. Let's see. I know that their Instagram. Yeah, so it's going to be Courtney B. Vance, who is a fantastic actor in his own right. I think that that's a killer choice, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the role. It reminds you of a Dumbledore recast in the Harry
Hmm.
Potter series. Each has their own enormous talents, and I'm sure Courtney will bring tons of different nuance to the role. And what I'm most excited from the gods is to see all of the female goddesses. We've got Andra Day coming in as Athena, and I can't wait to see any scenes with Annabeth. But I certainly can't wait to see who they cast as Hera, Aphrodite. I can't wait to see the female gods come in. I think we got a lot of the male gods last year, and I
Yep.
want to see a little bit more female power on Mount Olympus.
So I'm definitely looking forward to that as well. So was there anything about this season that you, as a fan of the book, you weren't as big of a fan of? Obviously, respectfully, of course. We're not like here to rip anything to shreds or anything like that. But if there's anything that you're like,
Hmm.
I I wonder if that either could have been tightened up or if the performance could have been done differently. What do you think? Is there anything that you didn't really like about the season or we're expecting something different?
That's a great question. I have to say, by the end of the first episode, I was along for the ride. And I wasn't really questioning anything. I think, especially fans of the book who then watched the
Mhm.
movies and it didn't necessarily live up to what we were hoping. I think from that first episode, from the very first moment that we see Percy in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and his mother telling, hold on, hold fast, Perseus, which is kind of, I think, this motto for the season that she imparts on him. He even says it back to her when she's in limbo with Hades. So from that moment, I just knew that like they were taking care of this so well. And then these little flashes of young Percy with the unicorns. I honestly would have loved to see more of young Percy, and I
Mhm.
think we probably will have a chance the actor that they cast to play the youngest Percy
Hmm.
was so good. I mean, he looks just like Walker. That
Hmm.
props to the casting department on that. And he was such a talent in his own right that, yeah, I would just say more. I would have liked more episodes. There
Hmm.
are a couple things in the books that we didn't necessarily get to see, but I think some of the changes too that they make really like led the way in
Hmm.
a totally different way. I think the finale setup, spoiler, he's eventually betrayed by Luke. And I was just rewatching the finale before this kind of orient myself. And I think starting that finale so slow with this sparring lesson between Percy and Luke, where he's like, where would I even need to use these sword fighting skills, especially in a world where like guns and bazookas exist.
Exactly.
Like Buffy talks about that a little bit, but
Mhm.
they're using swords and it's mythology. I got it.
Right.
To have the end, that final battle between Percy and Luke, where he's actually using all the sword fighting material that he's learned with the man who betrayed him and kind of stole the lightning bolt, and will be a huge crux in season 2. One of the things I'm really looking forward to is future scenes between Luke and Percy,
Hmm.
and Annabeth and Luke. She was also betrayed and watched this whole thing go down.
Hmm.
So I would say that surprised me in a way that it didn't really impact me as much in the book. And you've only got a few pages left. I think you're ready for it to be over when you're reading, but to
Right.
really sit there and enjoy those scenes really
Mhm.
captivated me.
So I agree full stop on more. I would I the moment that Minotaur fight
Mm.
ended at the end of the first during that first episode, I was in. I was like, this is awesome. And I think some of the parts that I could have used maybe a little bit more time is actually what's on your shirt. I would have loved more time at Camp Half-Blood. And the reason why is because I think that it gives Annabeth and Percy maybe just a little bit more time to develop some of the at that time a little bit of the animosity and the distrust because shortly after they get to Camp Half-Blood they're
We're on the
off.
quest. Yeah.
They're on their quest. So I'm not saying, hey, let's spend like 6 episodes there or anything like that. Maybe just like an episode or two more, just to slow burn a little bit of this relationship. Because at the very core of a lot of these stories, it's about the relationships. In fact, a, a lot of things that we watch are about the relationships. And if you just, we've already got enough time in the TV show where they can develop these relationships. I just would have loved to see more. And that's not me saying that I didn't buy the relationships. I was just enjoying it and I just could have used more. That's
I certainly, and they spent so much time and care developing Camp Half Blood. A lot of that is practical exteriors that they built like magically. You kind of half expect there to be some like unicorns in some strawberry fields up in Toronto somewhere, wherever they're shooting this. That the care that they put into actually making the cabins be so realistic. Yeah, I would have loved to spend a little bit more time there just because it is so awesome. But I get it. We got to get on the quest. We got to keep the story moving. As a writer, I understand that.
mm,
But as a fan, yeah, as much I do love the montage with Percy going through all of the different elements like archery and being terrible at it, smithing with the Hephaestus cabin. I think that we did at least get a good taste of it.
yeah, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how they continue to expand things in season 2. And we've got season 2 is supposed to come out sometime in 2025. I've heard February. I've also heard that I've heard later in the year as well. I don't really know when it's coming out, but I think enough time has passed where yeah, we could use a season 2 right about now.
I certainly think it's coming. I know that they have been filming. I think they are almost wrapped if they're not wrapped already. So then you got to throw some graphics on all that stuff and edit it. So it's coming. It's in
Mhm.
the can. When
Yeah.
I was at D23 like 2 months ago, they had just started. They played a tiny tease of the
Ooh,
chariot battles. I
ooh.
think they were truly 1 or 2 days into filming, so they didn't have a ton to show us. They did show us a little clip of the chariot
Mhm.
of Walker in the chariot, and it's amazing how much he's grown up. So he was probably cast 3 years ago,
Yeah.
pre-production, production, then doing press for a year. He's so much bigger. I got to meet him in real life
Oh,
and take
nice.
a photo with him, and I still look like a giant. I'm a 6'4", so I
Mhm.
towered above the cast. But he's really getting up there. In 2 years, he might be taller than me.
Yeah.
And one fun thing that I do love about season two, and something that I read about the mythology, since they can kind of twist things and they have the creator on staff, since he's growing at such an exponential rate, there's a new rule that Riptide, his sword, is going to grow with him. So the sword will get bigger too to kind of proportionally look right. And I just think that's so clever as a
Makes
fan, as a writer. Of course, it's a magic sword that comes back to him if he loses it. Of
mhm.
course it grows. I'm a huge fan of objects of power. As a screenwriter, I write a lot of fantasy, so I love Riptide, and I kind
Mhm.
of hope like we get a little bit more Riptide centric episodes because they certainly have a bond, and I would love to dig into that bond in an episode. That would be something I'd be excited to write.
Nice. Well, speaking of, so you are an aspiring screenwriter, and I guess why don't we start here? What first interested you in becoming a screenwriter? Why?
I have always loved television. I think some of my best friends growing up were the Power Rangers, Dawson Leary from Dawson's Creek, the Charmed Ones, Buffy the
Mhm.
Vampire Slayer. I've always loved shows that have outcasts that, when they come together, their powers combined, can defeat evil and save the day, and can uplift each other, or our differences are our strengths. I think we
Mhm.
see Percy, we see that in Buffy. So that always, as a kid growing up gay in Connecticut, where I didn't know anybody that looked like me, television was the only place I saw representation and authenticity and a way to live.
Mhm.
Outside of Will and Grace, we've got better representation for kids today. But even that
Right.
was important to me, to see that there were people
Mhm.
out there and that they were loved and funny and had successful futures, was important to me. And so I went to school for theater. For a long time, I wanted to be a writer. Sorry, I wanted to be an actor, like a musical theater actor. And when I was 19 years old, my voice changed. I went from being a soprano one and going to college, to having like no voice anymore, a much deeper voice, though I still get mammed on the phone sometimes. So it happens more often than I like to admit. So I, in college, took a improv class, and I loved the work that was going on in that room, and so ephemeral and fleeting that I wanted to go, I would go back to my dorm and I would write down some of the great scenes that I was seeing or took part in. And
Mhm.
from that, I have a playwriting degree, and I started a theater company where we were doing improv and transcribing those and doing plays. And eventually I was just like, why am I not? When the pandemic happened, I had always thought about sitting down and writing television, and just never had the time. But when we were all locked up in the world, I got my butt into some classes at UCLA and really studied the structure of television. Because there is like a bit of a formula if you're writing a
Mhm.
1 hour fantasy TV show. So during the pandemic, I wrote my first 1 hour fantasy called New Olympus,
Mhm.
which is about the modern day descendant of Pandora. So a nod to Greek mythology. The modern day descendant of Pandora who vows to put all of the original evils back inside her ancestors' curse box once and for all. And I got to build a fictional world called New Olympus, Connecticut, set it in my home state since I knew the players in that world really well. And it's one of the things I love about Percy Jackson. I loved revisiting mythology through a modern lens. Pandora is a story that's always bothered me. The world's first screw up, she couldn't contain her curiosity, opened the box, and let out thousands of evils into the world, or countless evils, really. And I was always like, just she gets a tough rub, and I just wanted to give her a redemption arc. What if she used that box and committed herself in a lineage of women to putting those evils back into the box, fighting them and defending their friends and their family. So that was kind of the origin of the story, and it took me about a year to
Mhm.
develop that world. I wrote 27 drafts, but it's gone on to win a lot of contests. As a
Nice.
writer, I've won 55 screenwriting contests and placed in 150 others. For my shorts and my pilots. But I gotta say, New Olympus was the first thing I got to do. And like when I was talking about Percy Jackson and Riptide, that connection of him and his sword, my main character, Liz, she has Pandora's box, which doesn't talk, but has a personality. And
Mhm.
it shakes and lets its feeling known. And it's kind of this ethereal, kind of intelligent box that has a whole lot of secrets and they have a contentious relationship. She doesn't want to be a hero. The box knows she can be. So there's these great scenes that really lit me up inside. And once I finished that, I couldn't turn back. I've
Mhm.
continued to write scripts, but I credit New Olympus and Pandora's Box with, I quite literally opened Pandora's box and
Mhm.
more spills out of me every day.
You're so right when it comes to those objects that can't speak and the relationships that can be developed with individuals.
Yes.
I think Aladdin and the Magic Carpet.
Yes.
I think Doctor Strange and his cloak of
And it's close.
levitation. Different things like that where they you have to find some way for those two things to develop a relationship. And if they can't talk, then they have to resort to being a physical presence and also emoting in a way without having to say anything or offer any type of facial expression. You have to get creative with that.
Yes.
And that's something
That
that I'm sure for you can be tricky to figure stuff like that out.
Absolutely. I really had to work it through. And I had friends that had a lot of suggestions. And
Mhm.
one of my friends suggested, what if the box chattered, like the lid closing down, like it was nervous,
Mhm.
or kind of vibrated on the table? Like, I've got an answer, like, look over here. So giving, anthropomorphizing the box
Mhm.
was the greatest suggestion I got. I don't think it was me. It might have been our mutual friend, Morgan. I'm pretty sure. I give her credit for most of my great ideas.
Mhm.
And I have a moment where when Liz finally does accept her destiny, a bit like Percy in the finale, the minds in the pilot, and she connects with the box for the first time in her whole life. She actually goes inside the box.
Mhm.
And she gets to speak to Pandora herself. So I actually found a way to get to let the box speak. I don't think that's something we'll ever do outside of that. Sorry, future New Olympus fans, you heard it here first. I think that's a one and off done thing. But I was just like, yeah, I really wanted to see the character Pandora,
Mhm.
and who else to understand a screw up than the original herself. And
Mhm.
I had so much fun with that bond with the box. And I think that's the show.
Mhm.
Liz and the box are the show. It's why people would come back, hopefully, episode after episode for 22 a season. I'm ready. I've got the first 3 seasons mapped out. I know which villain she'll face and what evil she'll
20.
face in every episode.
So let's say hypothetically, one day this gets picked up. And for you, if you had control over who you would cast for Liz, who would you
Oh,
cast?
I'm so terrible at casting.
Mhm.
It is not my gift,
Mhm.
but I'd love to see somebody like what Nina Dobrev was for the Vampire Diaries. I think
Mhm.
Liz, in looks and demeanor a bit in the beginning, is
Mhm.
a bit like a Nina Dobrev. But yeah, I'm so bad. I do think it would probably be somebody up and coming. She's early 20s, so I'm really not quite sure. But that's and they're all the characters are little bits of me. So it would be exciting to see who would fill that role.
See, and I love that you maybe not gave a name, but at least kind of point of reference. And then more
Yes.
importantly, you would want this to be something that not like big time TV star, but someone up and coming who give them a chance to anchor something that could be truly life-changing for them.
Kind of like Sarah Michelle Gellar, it is our Buffy. And she had done daytime television and she had done things before, but she really stepped into that role and to give it her all. You don't necessarily want like a Sydney Sweeney that's got 100 projects going on that they're developing for themselves. You want somebody that's going to be so committed to this role and is so excited to step into the world. That's who you'd want.
Do you have any screenwriters out there or screenwriters, playwrights, anything that you credit for either style or credit for continuing or trying to find a way to phrase this? Do you do you have any screenwriters that have influenced your writing? So screenwriter,
Oh,
author,
absolutely.
or playwright, anything like that.
Absolutely. I mean, the number one is probably Shonda Rhimes. I am a lifelong Grey's Anatomy fan. There was a period of time where I had only missed like two episodes live in 18 years.
Wow.
I think the dynamics of her characters, the way that she gives a character a flaw, like a fertility doctor that can't have babies, or a brain surgeon that has a brain tumor, a kid's doctor that acts really childish. I think the way that she gave a lot of her doctor characters flaws that impacted who they were, and just her ability to add things to our everyday life. I don't think people realize that when you say you're my person, that is Shonda Rhimes, that is Meredith and Christina talking to each other. That there are certain words that are out there in the lexicon because of Shonda Rhimes, and I really credit Grey's Anatomy with the pacing and the flair for drama. I certainly got that from her. My fast talking and my vocabulary is all a credit to Amy Sherman Palladino of Gilmore Girls. And all the pop culture references in that show were so fun as a fan, and inspired me to go read and watch things that I actually hadn't heard of, but were first referenced on that. And giving your audience a lot of credit. I think, like, assuming that they're smart, assuming they'll get the joke or go look it up. And then I think more modern, recent times would be Sarah Gamble, who ran The Magicians and You. I think the way that she not only runs shows and writers' rooms, but is really generous with writers. I've had the opportunity to meet her in real life and communicate a lot on Twitter and get to ask screenwriting questions. What do you do when you're stumped? How do you develop a pitch or a 5-minute presentation? And she generously takes the time to answer us fledgling writers, which is like so wild that I can scream into the internet and somehow reach her magic ears or thumbs to write me back. It is so generous and kind. But yeah, I'd say that beyond Percy Jackson, I do love these magic shows. My last big obsession was The Magicians. I even have a ta-da tattoo, which is inspired by that show. So yeah, for sure. Amy Sherman Palladino, Shonda Rhimes, and Sarah Gamble for sure.
You mentioned fantasy. You like writing within the fantasy realm. What other things do you like to write about? It could either be a particular genre or particular type of
Yeah,
story for you. Do you have anything in particular that really inspires you to want to write about it?
absolutely. I think I love 1 hour television. I'm a drama person. And that's not to say that my shows and my scripts have jokes, but I'm not necessarily a joke half-hour writer where you got 3 jokes per page and running gags. I do dramedy. So there's got to be a balance. I write really dramatic stuff. So you've got to have some levity in there to bring the audience on a nice roller coaster. My other television pilot is called Care Source, and it's about my family's experiences with Huntington's disease. My
Mhm.
mom passed away 8 years ago from a neurodegenerative disease, and she went from contracting with NASA and working at a huge aerospace company that she ran herself to relying on a nursing team, 209 nurses, and the rest of her life helped take care of us and helped raise me. These women lived and ate with us. They cared for us. They did my laundry sometimes. And I had this unique view into the world of home healthcare nursing and Huntington's disease.
Mhm.
So when it came time to work on something after I finished up New Olympus, and applying to a lot of these screenwriting fellowships, they always ask two things. Why are you the person to tell the story? And what is your unique connection to this material? And when I was answering that for New Olympus, it was, I love mythology and I always have, but so does a lot of people. So for Care Source, I am deeply in that world. Why am I the one to tell the story? Because I lived it. And why am I connected to that community? Because I also have I might also develop Huntington's disease since it's a genetic condition and I have a 50-50 chance. So it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. And I've always wanted to commit my mom's story to paper. And that was a different challenge. Was the first time I've ever written myself. There is a character of me. It's not Matt, it's Maddox. My brother is a character. His name is Mike in real life, and in the script it's Mike. They're not that difficult to figure out, but
Right.
it was nice to other the names so that they are a little bit different. And it was, again, there's a lot of comedy to what is a really difficult episode of a single mother getting diagnosed with a fatal illness and coming to terms with what does that mean for her and her 2 children that are still teenagers that will eventually have to step up and help parent her. but there's these moments of levity and these moments of humor that make it all work. And then there are these really devastating lows. So I love finding the balance. What can an audience handle? When to pull back? When to make them laugh? When to make them cry? And then outside of that, fun news: I just finished my first horror feature. Uh,
Really?
I have a horror short called Pietro Freda that's about a sculptor who is possessed by the spirit of the marble, the muse of the marble. And it was a 10-page short that had won a lot of awards for me. And I was talking to a development executive, and he said, I would love to see a full feature of that. So I set out, well, I procrastinated, but then I set out to write it. And so it's the longest thing I've ever written. It comes in at 92 tight pages. It was
Mhm.
my first feature. And I love movies. I really do think I'm a television writer and love to be a television writer, but sometimes the projects tell you what they want to be. Pietro Freda is not a series. There's not enough there to it. There's not enough to mine. Thing about Marvel, you can mine more. But I was able to mine 92 pages, and it was really fun to dive in that world and tell a really tight story in 93 pages,
Mhm.
beginning to end. Where I think most of my other shows, we just see the pilot, but I can envision seasons and seasons of content. So I will say it was difficult to write a movie, but it's nice that it kind of lives there. I don't have to
Mhm.
think about what the future will be and
Mhm.
plan all the seasons and do a whole pitch document for that.
There we go. So you already kind of answered a little bit about some of the challenges that you've experienced and between just trying to figure out certain aspects of of a show. So you mentioned how like with with the box for New Olympus, just trying to find the way that just make the box chatter a little bit or kind of make it jittery. What are some of the other challenges that you experienced during screenwriting, and how do you overcome them?
That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge is starting. I think a lot of us get in our heads, kind of, well, what do we want to write about? And writing the first 10 pages are the hardest. I write them time and time again. I edit them time and time again. I'm really defining what the world is, who the characters are, why we care, and developing a hook. I always say by the end of the first page, I got to have some sort of hook as to why we care about this. And Percy Jackson, we understand that there's something going on with his mom telling us this story of the Greek gods. We know that there's some connection there, so it hooks us in. With New Olympus, I'm able to hook that this girl has a destiny that she's not quite ready to accept. That those first 10 pages are, I think, the most important, and that you work the hardest on. And there, I wrote for New Olympus, I wrote 27 drafts of that. 12 or 15 of them were starting the show. How do I get Liz back to her hometown to accept her destiny or
Mhm.
push against her destiny? And I wrote where she was on a plane, a train, a bus. What if she never left home? Well, what if she came home as late as possible? Until you finally find it. And then, but you just got to keep cycling through ideas. And I've got a trusted group of friends that read and give feedback. And often their insights will unlock something for me. But
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest challenge are the first few pages and really defining a character so that people can hold on to them and know who they are. I don't like to say like blonde with a ponytail. I always lead with personality traits or a green goddess vegan, stuff like that. That's evocative, that gives you an idea, but doesn't necessarily tell them who to cast.
Yeah, make it a little bit more open-ended and just try and give the opportunity to find someone that's perfect for the role and not necessarily having to do specifically with the way that they look. So,
Absolutely. I always look to Grey's Anatomy as the perfect example of this. Dr. Bailey, played by the incomparable Chandra Wilson, a phenomenal African American actress that's done Broadway and has been on this show for 22 years. She was originally written as a blonde actress, but she came in, and as soon as she started speaking, Shonda Rhimes knew that she was the Bailey that was going to be in the show. So I always say, never limit who could come in and embody this role in a way that you never expected it. Just give a couple personality traits.
what do you enjoy the most from screenwriting? What's the thing that just continues to drive you to keep doing this?
As difficult as it is, and I toil away for hours on like one sentence or one comma, does it go here or there? There's a moment when you're writing and the world kind of falls away. I do a lot of writing late at night. The world kind of falls away. You don't hear your dog barking. Sorry, Scooby. You'll go out in a minute, where the world falls away and you kind of you fall into a flow state, a lot of people call it, where things are clicking and you're able to see the story and you're writing towards it. But for me, I actually hear my characters. When I've tapped into them, I'm almost dictating what's going on. And I'm trying to hold on to, I'm trying to catch up and hold on to the stream of consciousness that I've gotten into. And that's when I know that I've got something special. There would be nights when I was working on New Olympus where I jumped up and I had to write at 3 a.m. because it was pouring out of me. And I'll often think about an idea for a couple weeks before I start writing. And when I start to hear the characters' voices, I know that I'm ready to dive in. And that it's a really special moment. That is hard to explain. These are my friends that I have to get out of my brain and onto the paper to share with the world.
Just part of the creative process, right? When inspiration finds you, what are you going to do? Are you just going to ignore it and be like, I'll just get to it eventually? Or is it best to strike while the iron's hot and just
jump out of bed and write, or jump out of the shower and write? For a period of time, I just had I had like a pad on the wall so that I could like lean out and write it down, or Siri was taking notes. Because I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than thinking of an incredible line and then forgetting what it was. And there is a line in New Olympus that was in Act 4 on page like 37 or 38, and I to this day I kind of got an approximation of what it was in my head, but it was so good and so funny. And it's still good, but it is not that original thing that I didn't get out of bed to write. So I now always get out of bed or grab my phone and jot it down really quick, because there's nothing worse than thinking of something and kind of forgetting it.
Are there any genres or any types of stories that they're percolating in your head, just you haven't gotten a chance to like truly flesh it out yet? I'm sure you've got zillions of things going on in your head, but is there anything in particular that you're like, okay, what's next? And what's a particular type of story, or what's a particular genre that you're looking forward to trying out or looking to break into it?
Absolutely. I love that I did a mythological based thing. That was one of my passions as a kid. But I don't have a pure magic show. And as like, I really grew up on like a Charmed. I really would love my response to something like that. And I do have a couple ideas, and one has been noodling in the back of my brain. And they actually, two ideas just came together. I was like, oh, those are the same show, actually. That makes it more dynamic and interesting. So it's kind of coming together. Again, another object of power will be in that one. And then even recently, I miss New Olympus. So that's the thing, when these things don't get made and they're just in your brain and on your shelf, you mull them over and keep thinking about them. Actually thought of a half-hour version of another show about a magical box with a younger generation. It'd be more of a kid's show. But I was like, oh, that's a cool take, and only 30 pages instead of 60. That might be easier to write. I'm sure I'll end up eating those words later. But I was able to just I wrote it down in my idea journal. I have like 50 idea journals. And it just did kind of come pouring out of me. I was like, oh, if it's 30 pages, this would be the first 10, this would be the middle 10, this would be the last 10. Couple things, here's a tag at the end that makes viewers want to come back. So once you've written a bunch of these stories, that you're able to plug and play the pieces in exciting ways. But yeah, I'd love to do a fantasy. I'd love to do a sci-fi. As huge fans of those genre spaces. There's just so much. I love working in a genre outside of something that's just pure comedy or pure drama. When you get a genre like fantasy or sci-fi, there's just so many fun tropes that you can turn on their heads and fun devices to play with. It just, I think it lights my brain up, and that's always what I'm looking to do.
Well, you mentioned it before that you're predominantly a TV person, so I would be remiss not to ask you, what are you watching lately on television? And also, another question, what are some things that you've watched this year that you were like, yep, that's definitely up there in terms of favorites for this year?
Oh yeah. I mean, of my favorites this year, Agatha All Along, I thought had a pitch perfect season. And I gotta say, I saw a premiere of the first two episodes together, and I really thought, where is this going? I thought it was a really interesting way to get out of WandaVision with that Agatha of Westview episode,
Oh yeah, that
getting us
was
into the quest down the witch's road. And one, that song will for indelibly be in my brain at all times. I wake up at like 3 a.m. and singing the witch's road. I sing it in the shower and in the car. What a bop. But I think episode 7, the Lilia episode with the tarot cards, and I love tarot cards. I read tarot cards for myself. I'm a little bit witchy. So I was drawn to that character of the tarot reader. That episode 7 with non-linear storytelling, where the entire season clicks into place, was phenomenal from beginning to end. I mean, Patti LuPone knew that was coming. That is how you get somebody like Patti LuPone. I think that's one of the finest episodes of television we've seen in a long time. Really rivaling some of the better reveals like a Doctor Who has pulled off, like the River Song reveal, really snapping a whole series into place with one episode. That's very Whovian. The way that Jack Schaefer pulled that off. I think Jack Schaefer, that showrunner, describes her shows as puzzle boxes that audiences want to unlock, and it will, but you got to see where the pieces go. And I love that. I think that's a really cool way. J.J. Abrams used to call his shows mystery boxes, that you were always there to try and figure out what was going on inside and how to get in. So Agatha All Along, a totally different bout. I'm loving High Potential on ABC. I love a procedural. Like I said, I love Grey's Anatomy. I think the work that they're doing with one, I love smart people shows. There was an older show that used to be on called Scorpion, with a team of geniuses that were fighting crime, and that not only jumped the shark, that there's like that like hot air ballooned into the stratosphere, was like a weird shark jump the shark episode, but it was a good concept, and I loved those characters. I think they're doing really incredible work on redefining what that procedural element looks like, and where a genius fits into a team of cops. Particularly a single mom character is, I think, something we don't see in that space a lot.
Sure don't. Nope.
So I just thought that was all really brilliant. And I know that Caitlin, who is the star of that show, is one of the executive producers, that the single mother element of it was what interested her in the role. And that her son also has these kind of gifted brain powers, and her daughter doesn't. There's really fun family dynamics happening outside of the cool crime of the week. And I used to be a researcher for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so I love a weird piece of information or tidbit. The funny factoids that find their way into that show are so good that it just is like a smart viewer that you're like, ooh, I'm going to use that at my next cocktail party. That's a cool fact.
Nice.
I'd say those two things have been, and I'm sure there's more. I just started watching Black Doves with not Natalie Portman, Keira Knightley.
Yeah.
And that really compelling pilot initially grabbed me. Oh, and The Diplomat. What a good show. I got to go to an event here in LA and see the whole cast, including Allison Janney, who's in season 2 as the vice president. Love to see Allison Janney back in the political stratosphere, adjacent to the president. That dialogue and that drama. I love messy characters, and Kerry Russell is no stranger in this house. I was a diehard Felicity fan. I may or may not have gone to college in New York City thanks to Felicity. I had a Dean and DeLuca obsession. So, and now I pulled a reverse Felicity and moved to California from New York. So she's always a forefront of brain. And yeah, that show is just really phenomenal. What a last 2 minutes in a finale.
Black Doves is on my list because I believe she was Keira Knightley was nominated for a Golden Globe for that.
It's definitely scored some nominations in a late entry. I mean, I just saw it on my queue the other day, and it is that good. I mean, really, I think, speaking of shows that when they're short, you got to pay attention. I was doing my Christmas cards and trying to watch it in the background, and I had to turn it off. Because I was like, no, I owe her and this show my full attention.
Exactly. I struggle with that quite often because as I'm editing a podcast or doing something for work, looking for something to watch in the background, I've gravitated to certain shows that I know I could just put on in the background, like you said, those comfort shows, those longer season shows that you're like, I've seen these a zillion times, but if I put it on in the background, I don't have to pay attention to it. I know what's going on, and I'll still be entertained. So
I got it. I'm rewatching Supergirl right now. And it is great. There are a couple scenes that you do got to stop what you're doing and come watch.
Oh
But
yeah,
otherwise, yeah,
absolutely.
I know she's gonna save the day. We're gonna get a lecture and a little monologue about hope, which I do usually stop and listen to. And I can go about my day and do my Christmas cards and walk the dog and stuff.
Yeah, it's been quite a year for television, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out next year. And Matthew, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me about Percy Jackson, about television, but your screenwriting as well. So,
Of course.
do you have anything that you'd like to plug? And if anybody would like to continue chatting with you about Percy Jackson or screenwriting or just television in general, where can the people find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on all major platforms, Blue Sky, X, formerly Twitter. Yeah, I know. I'm still there though.
I'm
Screenwriting, Twitter, still
I'm
holding
I'm
on.
still I'm still on X as well, but I have been focusing a lot more attention on Blue Sky. But yeah, I get it.
As we should. And I've seen massive growth there in the last couple of days. So it's really lovely to see that. But yeah, my account is Writerly203, Writer LY203. And you can also find out more information about my projects at matt-nicholson.com. Or no, sorry, matt-writer.com. Matt Nicholson was taken. So
It was
I
taken.
know, I know. I even tried my middle name. So yeah, matt-writer.com, or just search Care Source or New Olympus in my name and it'll come up. But yeah, you please reach out if you're interested in those projects. I'm always happy to talk about them. And I'll be continuing to submit them to festivals and different fellowships to hopefully snag the right eyes, whether that's representation or a producer that's interested.
Cool. Well, best of luck to you. I'd love to have you back on to keep up the conversation when it comes to television. Anything that you'd ever want to talk about, I'm game. So I
I
would
love it. Please.
love to have you back on. And that's going to do it for this episode of SPDM TV. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything SPDM Crew wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Threads. Can't forget about Threads at SPDM Crew. Check out our website at spdmcrew.com. Shout out to HiFlyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any marketing, logo, or brand standard needs, contact them at hiflyercreative.com. If you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM Crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, happy watching, friends.